Good afternoon, grade sevens. I hope that you guys are all doing well and that you've had a productive Tuesday so far. Guys, we're back for the 20th lesson of the year, which is quite an achievement because we've obviously been through quite a lot of work. So, we've made some really good progress this year, guys, making our way through your grade 7 syllabus. But uh, despite the fact that it is quite a big milestone, we do still have a lot of lessons to go. All right. There's still lots for us to discuss in this grade 7 syllabus. So, guys, on your screens now, you should be able to see my screen. I'm scribbling in a few different colored pens, including white, yellow, orange, and even blue. Guys, it's going to be the same this week as it is every week. If for some other reason you cannot see my see what I'm writing on my screen, or you cannot hear what I am saying, you guys need to please let me know. All right, guys, I want to make sure that everybody just quickly has a chance to join us. So I just want to give everyone an opportunity to do that very quickly. And then we're going to get going with today's work. All right. So, guys, just give us 1 or 2 minutes, please. And then we're going to start with our lesson today. If you guys have any questions for me, now would be a great time to ask. But please make sure that you have also got all of the stationery that you were going to need for today's lesson. All right, guys. I'll chat to you in about 2 minutes' time. Okay, grade sevens. I'm not going to make you guys wait any longer for us to get going with today's lesson. So, guys, let's go ahead and get started with today's work. We're covering something a little bit new today, and we're sort of going back to one of the topics that we briefly mentioned at the beginning of the year. And grade sevens, that is going to be the topic of percentages. Okay. We want to talk about what there is to know about percentages and discuss how we change from other number forms into percentages. So for example, guys, we can be given percentages in the form of a decimal or in the form of a fraction, right? And we need to learn to write it in a percentage format. Okay, so that's what we're going to be focused on in today's lesson. Grade sevens, let's get going with today's work. So let's start right at the beginning. Let's quickly think about the 4 different major number forms, right? This is not necessarily something that you have to write down, but it is a bit of an introduction to today's lesson. So the first kind of number form that we've used extensively already in maths this year and in previous years would be whole numbers. We've then also paid close attention to the world of decimal values, right? And we will still check in with that topic again from time to time as the year progresses. But we also now know about the world of fractions. And these are 3 of the most important number forms that we work with, but there is a 4th. And this is a number form that we haven't had an opportunity to discuss in that much depth this year so far. And that is the world of percentages. Okay, so The reason why we need to understand a lot about percentages is because they are used in so many different sectors, right? We use percentages when we are thinking about everything from business to science, right? We can use percentages to represent a lot of different values. And it really is true that we use it in many of these different sectors. But just like we learned with the topic of decimals and fractions, we need to be able to look at percentages and convert them into decimal values and into fractions, because these number forms are all interconnected. But with that being said, not only do we need to be able to convert them in between these other two number forms, in as well as percentages, we've got to be able to make comparisons too, right? Using our ability to convert between these different number forms. So, for example, grade sevens, we could compare the values 0.04 and 40%, right? How do we decide which of these values is bigger, smaller, or equal to the other, right? Which of those comparison symbols are we going to use in this case? And when we look at 0.04 and 40%, 40% is much bigger than 0.04. How do I know this? Well, 0.04 is the same as 4 out of 100, and 4 out of 100 is the same as 4%. So if we continue this comparison as we change through these different number forms, we can see that it is clear that 40% is bigger than 4%, right? So that's what we want to discuss in today's lesson. How do we deal with comparisons like this? And just in general, how do we go through this process of converting a value between the different number forms? Okay, so there are two different topics that we really want to make sure that we discuss thoroughly in today's lesson. Right. So let's go ahead and start looking at some basic information about percentages. Right now that we know about these four different number forms. So what is a percentage, grade sevens? How would you define a percentage if your teacher asked you to write down a definition? Right? A percentage, let's quickly write a definition down. A percentage is a ratio. But technically, it can be a number as well. So we can call it a number or ratio that is expressed as a fraction of 100. Right? You need to know that definition. And why is writing down the definition going to benefit us? Well, the first thing that's important is that this definition clearly points out to us how this idea of percentages is already linked to the world of fractions. And we know from the work that we've covered on decimals and on fractions that these two topics are also related, right? So immediately we can see that there is an important connection that exists between fractions, decimals, and percentages, right? There is a connection between these three different number forms that is very important. right? What else do we need to know as a percentage? Percentages can be derived from fractions and decimals. So there's a very important number that pops up in this definition, which is the number 100. And we always want to use that as our benchmark when we are trying to deal with percentages, right? So let's go ahead. Once we've written that down, grade sevens, we can go and make a small subheading for some examples. And our question is going to be convert the following fractions into percentages. Okay, I'm going to go through a few examples with you guys, and I would suggest that you do write notes. So let's take a look at some examples. Number one, 2 over 5, or 2/5. Number two, 4 out of 10. Number three, 3/4. Number four, right? Make sure you write down the examples, please. Let's say, for example, guys, we had another example of 10 out of 25, or 10/25. And number five, our final example, was something a little bit trickier, like 10 out of 30, or 10/30. Right, so how are we going to convert these into percentages, guys? Well, like I said to you, the first thing that we need to remember is that when we work with percentages, we always want to express our value as a fraction out of 100. So let's say I have the number, or the fraction, 2/5. How would I change this to be a percentage? Well, the first step is for me to change it to be a fraction out of 100. And the way I do that is by always changing the numerator and the denominator by the same factor. So I want to ask myself, how many times can my denominator, the number 5, fit into 100 perfectly? Right, and we can count 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and so on. And the answer is that 5 can fit into 120 times. But guys, I've expressed or explained this many times over. Whatever we do to one part of a fraction, we must do to the other. The reason for this is that it keeps the value of the fraction the same, even though it looks a little bit different, right? This is a form of manipulating a fraction. So in the numerator, we're going to write the newer version of the fraction now. 2 times 20 is the same as 40, and 5 times 20 in the denominator is the same as 100. And whenever we have a fraction like this that has a denominator of 100, we can immediately write the numerator as a percentage, right? So we can simply say 40%. So 2/5 grade 7s is the same as 40%. Let's look at example number 2 over here, 4/10. Now we've chatted about equivalence quite a lot, and I want to show you why it's so important. How would I change 4/10 to be a fraction out of 100? Well, I'd have to start with my denominator, right? In the denominator, I have, excuse me, guys, the value 10. To get from 10 to 100 by multiplying, I would have to times by 10. But what I do to the bottom of a fraction, I must do to the top, so that I don't change the value of the fraction, just the way that it looks. The result of this is that 4 times 10 in the numerator will give me 40, and 10 times 10 in the denominator will give me 100. Right? And again, we have a fraction out of 100 now, so we can take the numerator and simply write it with a percent sign. And now we can see how 2/5 and 4/10 both represent 40%. Okay? And that's because, guys, if I take the value 2/5, the fraction 2/5, and I multiply it by 2 in the numerator and in the denominator, we get 4/10, which is our second fraction. And this is important because it tells us that when fractions are equivalent, this is something you learned about in grade 4 and grade 5. Equivalent fractions will give us the same percentage, okay? So even though the fractions look different, again, because we are working with equivalent fractions, we know that their value is the same. So let's move on to example number 3 over here, 3/4. How do I change this into a percentage? I need the denominator to be 100. How many times does 4 fit into 100, grade 7s? It may take some time to figure this out, but you'll realize that the number 25 is quite a common value to work with. 4 fits into 125 times. So if I multiply by 25 in the denominator, I'm going to do the same in the numerator. In the numerator, 3 times 25 is going to give me 75, and 4 times 25 in the denominator gives me 100. So it's very important that we get this step of changing our fraction correct, right? Because now 75/100 can be written simply as 75 Right, 10 over 25 is the next fraction that we want to look at. I hope that this is making some sense to you guys. Please make sure that you are copying notes. Right, 10 over 25. How do I change this to be a fraction out of 100? Well, the number 25, the denominator fits into 100 4 times. So if we multiply by 4 at the bottom, we're going to do the same at the top, right? 10 times 4 gives us 40. And 25 times 4 in the denominator gives us 100. And would you look at that, grade 7s? We have a third example that is also equal to 40%. Now, example number 5 is a little bit different, and I want to go through it with you because sometimes there are going to be situations like this that pop up in our tests or exams. Right? 10 over 30. How do I change this into a fraction out of 100, grade 7s? The issue that I have is that if I look at the denominator, the number 30, 30 does not fit into the numerator, 30 does not fit into 100 perfectly, right? If we count in 30s, we would say 30, 60, 90, 120. We need it to fit into 100. So in a situation like this, you are sometimes going to have to work by first changing your fraction a little bit before you make it a fraction out of 100. So, for example, what we could do in this situation, let's think very quickly, guys. Let me just change the numerator, guys. Sorry about that. I just want to change this to a 9 to make the example just a little bit easier. The number 30 still does not fit perfectly into 100. So instead, we're going to try and change the denominator to be a number that can fit into 100. So for example, in this case, I could divide the numerator and the denominator by the value 3. Why would I do that? Because now 9 divided by 3 gives me 3, and 30 divided by 3 gives me 10. Now 10 is a value that I can manipulate to fit into 100. So how many times does 10 fit into 100, grade 7s? It would fit in 10 times. Whatever we do to the denominator, we also have to do to the numerator, right? So in the numerator, 3 times 10 is going to give us 30, and 10 times 10 in the denominator gives us 100. So we can write the final answer and show that 9 over 30 is actually the same as 30%. All right. So guys, this is how we convert percentages into, fractions into percentages. But like we said at the beginning of this lesson, grade 7s, there are more connections between the other number forms. So yes, we have to be able to change fractions into percentages, but we also have to be able to change decimals into percentages. But pay close attention to the way I've drawn this diagram, because sometimes it's a little bit difficult for us to go straight from a decimal to a percentage. Many people find this a little bit confusing, but you do get better with it over time. However, what's sometimes a little bit easier for us to do is instead go from decimal values into fractions, then into our percentages. Okay. So that's what we're going to start by doing now, grade 7s. I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to quickly copy these examples if need be, and then we're going to move forward. Do we have any questions so far, grade 7s? Is there anything you guys would like to know from me? If you have a question, please type it into the comment box for me. All right, guys, I haven't seen any questions yet, so I'm going to assume that you guys are comfortable for me to move forward. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at how we would convert from decimals. So again, let's write a small subheading just so that we have different sections of examples, right? They each have their own question. Convert the following decimals into percentages. Right. We're also going to go through a few examples of this, guys, but keep in mind that we are going to solve with a little bit more working out this time around. So let's take a look at example number 1. Let's say, for example, we had 0, 0.8. Then we had 0, 0.05. 0, 0.19. Number 4, let's say 0, 0.07. And number 5, 0, 0.2. Right, we're going to go through each of these examples one by one, guys. But you should copy them down now quickly. So, whenever we decide to work with decimals, grade 7s, you guys should know by now that the idea of place value is very important to our understanding of decimals, right? So let's take a look at 0.8, for example, as our first attempt. I've mentioned to you guys that when we start with a decimal value, a lot of the times it's going to be easier for us to first change something to be a fraction, and then we can change it into being a percentage. And this is the rule that I'm going to follow for the next 5 examples. Okay, if you guys are confident to say that 0.8 is 80%, this is 5%, and so on and so forth, that's fine. But there's no harm in learning how to also convert it into a fraction, right? It's good practice. So, looking at the examples we have over here, 0,8, grade 7s, we know that the 8 is sitting in the 10th position, right? It is the first decimal value or the first digit after the decimal comma. So, because we are working with tenths, it means that we would change this into a fraction out of 10, right? It's going to be the fraction 8 out of 10. 0.8 is the same as 8 out of 10. And when we do this, we can see how easy it becomes for us to change our fraction then into a percentage. Because we know that in order to write a fraction as a percentage, we must have a denominator of 100. So, looking at this new fraction, we know that our denominator of 10 fits into 100 10 times. So, we're going to multiply by 10 in the denominator, but to avoid changing the value of our fraction, we're going to do exactly the same in the numerator. When we do this, 8 times 10 in the numerator, oh sorry guys, I wrote 80 by mistake, times 10, right? You multiply by the same thing at the top and at the bottom. 8 times 10 in the numerator gives us 80. 10 times 10 in the denominator gives us 100. And whenever we have a fraction out of 100, you may write the numerator as a percentage with the percent sign. Okay. Guys, I see that somebody said in the comment box that they would like help with exponents and integers. We have actually had quite a few lessons on this, but what I'll do for you is find the dates for the recordings for the exponents and integers lessons, and then you can go back and watch the 3 or 4 lessons in your own time as opposed to me reteaching all of the work. Okay. And then what you're more than welcome to do is come to me with any of the questions that you have after watching those lessons. But the advantage of watching the recordings is that then you will also see the quizzes on iRainbow that we went through that you can still go and practice in your own time. All right. So guys, I just want to finish these 5 examples quickly, and then I'll make sure to quickly come back and give you the dates for the lessons that we had on exponents and integers. All right. If we have any other questions, grade 7s, you're more than welcome to ask. So, looking at example number 1, guys, it's clear how we have followed this order that we've written down on the right-hand side. We start with a decimal value, and instead of jumping straight to a percentage, it's often easier for us to change into fraction form first. All right, so that's what we're going to do with example number 2. Looking at the second example, 0,05. What is different about this example? Well, first things first, we can see that the first decimal value, which represents our tenths, has a 0 in this spot. But we do have a few hundredths, right? So, how do we write this decimal as a fraction? Because we are working with hundredths, we want to write this as a fraction out of 100 already. And because of the numerator, because of the 5 that we have sitting in the hundredth spot, we can go ahead and put a 5 in the numerator. And luckily for us, grade 7s, in this case, we don't even need to manipulate the fraction that we have. 5 out of 100 is already in the perfect format for us to just go ahead and write that 0,05 is the same as 5%. Right, example number 3. Let's go ahead and break this down. In this case, grade 7s, we have both tenths and hundredths. And you guys should have practiced writing decimals as fractions your fair share this year. So when we have something like 0,19, because we have both tenths and hundredths, we are going to use the smallest digit that we have, right? Our hundredths. And so we are going to write 100 at the bottom of this fraction that we are changing the decimal into. Then in the numerator, we will put the full 19. And so because this is already a fraction out of 100, we can confirm or conclude that 0.19 is the same as 19%. Right, example number 4 is very similar to the second example. We only have hundredths in this example. There are no tenths. So when converting this into a fraction, we're going to take note of the fact that we have 7 hundredths. Okay? So I'm going to write 100 at the bottom of my fraction and write a 7 in the numerator. And because it's already in the perfect format, 0,07 is the same as 7%. And finally, guys, example number 5. Looking at our decimal that we have over here, we clearly only have tenths in our decimal. We have 2 tenths. So when I attempt to write this as a fraction, I know that I'm already going to have a 10 in the denominator. And because I have a 2 sitting in the tenths position, I'm going to put a 2 in the numerator. Now, this is not a fraction out of 100, so I'm going to change it by getting the denominator to be 100. I'm going to do that by asking myself, how many times does 10 fit into 100? It does so 10 times. So I'm going to multiply by 10 in the numerator and in the denominator. And in the numerator, 2 times 10 is going to give me 20. And 10 times 10 in the denominator will give me 100. So for example, number 5, grade 7s, we get an answer of 20%. So, guys, when it comes to changing a decimal into a percentage, I strongly recommend that you guys try and use a game plan like this. Okay. It's not a hard and fast rule. If you guys have a different way that you prefer to do it, you're more than welcome to do it that way. But this is just a really good way to practice doing it because it's not only logical, but it helps you practice changing from decimals into fractions as well, which is a very helpful skill. Okay. Right, guys. So, all I'm going to do now is give you one more minute to finish copying, and then I want to show you guys iRainbow. Okay. Right, guys. I've also seen another question from somebody about functions and relationships. That's absolutely something that we can talk about in the coming weeks. Okay. We will definitely take a look into that. I appreciate you making the suggestion. Guys, I'm going to quickly change my screens. If you need me to come back to this screen over here so that you can finish copying, please just type a message into the comment box for me. Okay, but let's go and take a look at iRainbow, guys, because it's definitely worth you looking into. Right. So, when we decide to practice this section of work, guys, we're going to need to know where to find a quiz. And I think that this really is a great way for you guys to practice going through how to change between all of your number formats, right? It's a fun form of exercise for this section of work. But, guys, just 1 second. Sorry, guys. Right. We are going to go ahead and I believe click on this section over here, numbers, operations, and relationships. We are then going to click on the bottom topic over here, the very last topic in the section called number sense, percentages. Once we've then clicked on that, there are a few different quizzes that we can attempt in order to practice this section of work, guys, and it's completely up to you as to which section you choose to go through first. But the first two quizzes would be great practice for you guys. We've obviously practiced calculating the percentage from decimals and fractions today, right? So if you wanted to be really specific about practicing what we covered in today's lesson, you can go to this quiz at the top right over here, and we can go into level 1 just to see what the quiz looks like. For example, it asks us to convert 0.6 to a percentage. We can change 0.6 to a fraction first of 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10 is then the same as 60 out of 100. So the answer would be 60% in this case. Okay, I don't want you guys to do these solutions in your head the way that I just did, but I was just trying to point out that there's a process of thinking to follow, right? Just like the examples that we went through. So I would strongly suggest that you guys write on a piece of paper so that you can follow your own working out. Now, I'm not going to go through too many examples here, but sometimes it will ask you to go backwards. Write 70% as a decimal, right? So for example, we know that 70% can automatically be written as 70 out of 100. And that's the same as 0.7, right? 0.70 if you'd like. But if we simplify our answer, it'll just be 0.7. So this section of work will test how you change from percentages into decimals and fractions and vice versa. It's going to test how well you can work forwards, but also backwards. So I would strongly recommend you guys go ahead and try this quiz over here at the top right. But if you want to start at the very beginning, go ahead and start with what is the percentage. Okay. There's no harm in going back to the basics to make sure you understand everything before moving forward, guys. Now, in the coming weeks, we're going to take a look at how we compare percentages and decimals and fractions and so on and so forth, because you guys do need to practice converting between these number forms a lot for grade 8. But we will get there in due time, grade 7s. All right. So please make sure you go and try some of these quizzes. You guys know where to find it now. But let me quickly respond to some of the questions that I see coming through, guys. We are actually done with today's lesson. Time is unfortunately up. But somebody has asked me to go back to the screen that I was using to write down all of our notes. Give me a second and I'll do that very quickly for you. Then there's another question about whether or not everything in maths is in a mobile form on iRainbow. Guys, I'm not 100% sure if this is something you can download on your phones and mobile devices yet. I don't know for sure. I don't think it's the case, but you guys would have to check. I'll try and find out for you and then bring you guys an answer. But from what I understand, guys, we have to write all of this down onto, we have to download iRainbow onto some kind of a computer. All right. Then there are a few other requests about needing help with patterns, for example. Guys, we will get back to doing this section of work soon enough. All right. But I do just want to quickly find the dates for the lessons on which or during which we spoke about exponents, right? We had someone ask about the world of exponents and integers as well. I'm going to quickly write down the dates that we had those lessons on so that you can go back and find the recordings either on Facebook or on YouTube, guys. So just give me 1 second to quickly confirm all of this for you. All right. So grade 7's adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing integers was on the 13th of February and the 20th of February. I would recommend you write these down so that you can go and take a look at them if you want to go through these topics. And then when we talk about the world of exponents, guys, we had our first lesson about this on the 19th of March. But then we also had 1 or 2 more lessons. So there was another one on the 26th of March. And finally, the last one was on the 2nd of April. Okay, so you can go ahead and watch the recordings that you find on these days in order to go through these topics of work. Okay, and this will explain everything in a lot of detail, and I hope that that helps. So somebody says that they got a tablet from iRainbow. Guys, I'm not completely sure of all of the specifics around that. Unfortunately, I just do all of the teaching. But if you need help with that, or something is giving you a little bit of trouble, please just send me a message. All right. And then I will help put you guys in contact with the people that can help you solve those technical issues, because unfortunately I don't have any understanding of the background to the software and so on. All right. So, guys, I do see once again that there have been questions to go through some other topics, but unfortunately, I can't do this today. I will make time for us to go through this in the future. But grade sevens, guys, that's going to be it for today's lesson. I'm going to be seeing all of you guys again next week. All right. A date and a time will be confirmed with you on Monday morning. But grade sevens, thank you so much for joining, guys, and interacting. I will take note of all of your suggestions about what topics you want to go through. But please, guys, make sure you study hard and try those quizzes. And if you have any questions, bring them to the beginning of next week's lesson. All right. Thank you so much, grade sevens. I'll speak to all of you again next week. All right. Thanks, guys.